The Trump administration is building the most aggressive voter suppression apparatus since the Jim Crow era, and we need to talk about it. Over the past year, the administration has laid the groundwork for all of this, but the pieces have really started to click into place over the past couple of weeks. At this point, Trump is basically blatantly telegraphing how he plans to rig the 2026 midterms in his favor. And of course, the goal here is not persuasion, it's suppression. They want people to question whether voting is safe, legal, or even worth doing. Now, Trump took things into uncharted territory this week when he went on former FBI or a deputy FBI director Dan Bongino's show and called for the nationalization of elections in 15 places. Now, that obviously triggered immediate backlash from people, while Republicans sort of, shrugged their shoulders, said they didn't like the phrasing and moved on. But reporters kept following up on this comment he made on Dan Bongino's podcast. And when he was asked yesterday about what he meant for nationalizing 15 elections and what that would look like, take a look at how he responded to it. Let's see.
When you see some of these states about how horribly they run their elections, what a disgrace it is, I think the federal government, when you see crooked elections, and we had plenty of them, and by the way, we had them last time, but go to 2020 and look at the facts that are coming out. Rigged, crooked elections. If we have areas, take a look at Detroit, take a look at Pennsylvania, take a look at Philadelphia. You go take a look at Atlanta. Look at some of the places that horrible corruption on elections. And the federal government should not allow that.
Now, look, let's start with the fact that the president's stupidity never ceases to, amaze people. The question of, I don't know who decided that states should run their own elections. It's in the Constitution. It is called the Elections Clause, and it is a deliberate clause in the Constitution that is supposed to decentralize the administration of elections, so the federal government can't do the thing that Donald Trump is suggesting right now, which is what authoritarian tyrants do. Now, also notice another gem in here, which is the places he calls out as having horribly run elections. Of course, there are places that he lost in the 2020 election, and they are in swing states. He's not going to try to nationalize an election in a red state because he's going to comfortably win there. And he's arguably also not going to call for the nationalization of an election in a blue state because, he's obviously not going to win those states. We're not in full Russian authoritarian, rigged election territory yet, but never say never. So of course, he's not going to pick places he's going to win comfortably. He's going to pick places and call them out where he can create doubt around the legitimacy of the election to continue to fuel conspiracy theories about if a candidate has won or lost there, whether he's on the ballot or not. And I think that the thing is, though, he is not stopping at creating doubt around elections anymore. We are now seeing the deployment of ICE being used to set up this suppression and intimidation model, not only for citizens, but for state agencies as well, which is where the most dangerous element of this comes in. It's one thing to create doubt in the court of public opinion, which is also dangerous and bad, but to use your, private federalized police force to try and change the outcomes of elections is when we start getting into really dangerous territory. And Senator Chris Murphy laid this out in terms of, where we are starting to see this happen already, even several months out from the midterm elections. So let's see what Chris Murphy has to say about this in a couple of different clips, because I think he lays it out very nicely. Let's start with what he says about Minnesota. Let's take a look.
The president sends a letter to state officials in Minnesota. He says, I'll be glad to take ICE officials out, but you got to give me control of your voter rolls. This is a key swing state. It's going to have an important gubernatorial election and an even more important Senate election. And Trump is saying, if you give me control of your voter lists, then I'll take the ICE agents out.
Yeah. Immigration enforcement tied to election infrastructure. Two things that have absolutely nothing to do with one another, despite obviously how much Trump and the GOP talk about illegal immigrants voting. we don't have to go down that validating or invalidating that nonsense, because it has already been done hundreds of times, and after the 2020 election, and confirmed time and again that there is no meaningful voter fraud that or illegal immigrant voting that happens in the country that has ever swayed an election and is ever more than a couple of votes per election. But that is where we see this authoritarian creep really start to happen now, which is weaponizing fear to extract control, and again, weaponizing a private police force to access things like voter data that the federal government should not be accessing and should not have oversight over. Because that, again, the elections clause in the Constitution that Donald Trump doesn't seem to be paying attention to, or I guess the rest of the GOP for that matter. And so we're watching this happen in Minnesota, but it's not just happening in Minnesota, where, of course, there is a swingy Senate seat up for grabs this year, and a gubernatorial race that looks like it's going to be less competitive if Mike Lindell ends up being the Republican nominee. But Murphy also expands on this and talks about the recent raid on the election office in Fulton County, Georgia, as well. Let's see, his take on it as well.
We have the FBI raid of the voting office in Georgia. They take all these ballots to a place that we still don't know about, and we know exactly what's going to happen here. They're going to take these ballots, they're going to claim that they counted them again, and in fact, Donald Trump won Georgia, and that's going to be used by the president to do what he then told all of us he was going to do on a podcast just a day or two ago: nationalize elections in key states.
And Murphy's spot on. It is a clear playbook that it looks like Trump is going to use at this point. First of all, the election official in Fulton County says he has no idea where the ballots are. Democrats have no idea where the ballots are. So nobody knows. They're obviously being, I'm sure they're going to be recounted behind closed doors. And as Chris Murphy said, Trump is going to claim victory in 2020, say they discovered a bunch of fraudulent ballots, and then use that as a way to nationalize elections. Now, I think there's this question of people saying, well, how does that happen? It's going to go against the Constitution, and there's never going to be a law that's passed that does something like that. That might be true, but this is where the ICE element of this comes in. Donald Trump, if he declares an emergency, is going to deploy ICE to intimidate voters in various swing areas of the country. It is going to happen. We're already watching ICE deployed to intervene in the upcoming election. And, something that maybe a year ago people were calling alarmist in terms of ICE being present, outside of polling places is so close to being a reality that it is not alarmist anymore. And you know why it's not alarmist? Because look at what Steve Bannon had to say on his podcast last night about that possibility. Let's take a look.
You're damn right. We're going to have ICE surround the polls come November. We're not going to sit here and allow you to steal the country again. And you can whine and cry and throw your toys out of the pram all you want, but we will never again allow an election to be stolen.
This is not hyperbole anymore. Every time people have been told that they're overreacting over the past couple of years, or honestly, since the beginning of the Trump era, the worst case scenario happened. And this is the next step. Deployment of ICE to intimidate voters is the next step. And the problem is you are going to have legal voters who stay home out of fear. You will have non-white voters who are worried about, non-white citizen voters who are worried about being targeted by ICE. So even if they are legal, because ICE has clearly shown, no discernment on if someone is a legal immigrant or not, and we've seen them deport, over 100 American citizens at this point, there is a risk of legal voters staying home out of fear because of what is happening here. And I think the problem with this too is, people want to focus on bread and butter issues. They're important, and they are the issues that people live every single day. The problem is we can't focus on bread and butter issues like affordability and healthcare if we don't have a democracy. If we don't have a democracy, talking about those issues just becomes, theater at a certain point. And so, look, Democratic leaders have stepped up and acknowledged and vocalized that this is crazy and that this is probably going to happen. Now, I think the next question for our Democratic leaders is, what is the strategy to stop this, and how quickly can it be deployed? Because the American people are ready for it. That's it for me today. If you liked what you saw in this video, throw a like on it. Follow the Demwins Media YouTube channel. Follow me at buildingthebench.substack.com, and we will keep bringing you the news as you need to see it. Thanks for watching.